Thank you. Right there. That's your bully pulpit. A president who just names what's really going on in this country. You have these huge companies coming in, buying all this housing. First of all, you should not be able to turn housing into a commodity in a country where 600,000 people are homeless. You know, the problem is not just the poor in this country, but also the near poor. People who are terrified because they know if one rent check doesn't get paid. Okay? So those companies should not be able to buy those houses.
Welcome to The Conservative Poet with me, Amania. Happy that you're here today. So we're talking today a very interesting conversation that I want to have. As you all know, Vivek Ramaswamy and Larry Elder were recently on the Breakfast Club. And I decided, well, I wanted to see how the Breakfast Club crew treats other people on their show, being that they treated Vivek Ramaswamy and Larry Elder so poorly and so disgracefully and so disgusting and so disrespectful. So I wanted to see, is this their style? Is this what they do? Because I've never really listened to the Breakfast Club. And so you ask the universe and the universe will deliver. So it came across my feed that they had an interview with Cornel West, and they also had one with Marianne Williamson. Now, all four of the people we talked about are running for president. Now, Larry Elder and Vivek Ramaswamy are Republicans. They are conservatives. And Marianne Williamson is a Democrat. And Cornel West, I believe he is green, independent, I suppose. And so I wanted to see, how is it that they treated the other people on the show, being that they treated Larry and Vivek the same, disrespectfully. And so I watched the Cornel one. This video is not about Cornel. This one is about Marianne Williamson. But the Cornel one, I will do that one as well, but they did treat him cordially. And so for the Marianne Williamson one, I didn't watch the whole thing. I watched about a minute of it and I says, you know what? I'd like to react to this raw as I watch the whole thing on tape. So I stopped myself from watching it. And so now we're going to watch it. And so, of course, you know, I always have technical difficulties. So this is my second time trying to record this. So thus far, I've watched about 10 minutes of it. So hopefully I can still remember the good zingers that I had. And I pray to God that I don't have to re-record this again, because I seriously might just break this computer. I just might break it.
As you know, talk about gun violence and all this violence that's happening in the U.S. in the last couple of years. What is your take on that, and how would you try to curb that and fix that?
On this one, I feel that Biden has his heart in the right place. He is trying. We need an assault weapon ban. Obviously, we need the banning of bump stocks. We need the banning of high-capacity magazines. We need the 3D to handle the issue of the 3D printers. But I think we need to move beyond the conversation of, is it culture or is it policy? It is both. Mm-hmm. And I think with this latest just spate of senseless, horrible, violent happenings, I think we're at a possibility of an inflection point. I sense both on the left and the right that there is a critical mass of Americans who feel this has gone too far. You have even Republican governors now giving a little bit in terms of things like federal red flag laws. So we know what we need to do. We know that easy access to guns is a large part of the problem. We know that we have more guns than people in this society, but we also know that we have a violent society. Our economic policies are violent. So much of our media is violent. So much of our, even our food policies, we are a violent society. And there are millions of people, I don't know about millions of people, there are many people making billions of dollars off breeding violence and breeding fear. So we're going to have a violent society until we decide to be a non-violent society.
And you think we'll get some type of common sense gun reform when you have the president of the United States of America saying that he's powerless and that, you know, he has to beg Congress to do something, and you have so many of these GOP senators that they get direct funding from these gun lobbyists like the NRA. You seem like you have some optimism. I don't see it.
Well, you're certainly, I think we have to go back to why there was a time. Obama was an example. First years of the Obama administration, he had a Democratic House and he had a Democratic Senate. So we had a trifecta at that time. Biden would say, and there's some truth to it, that even though he had a Democratic House and Senate in his first 2 years, that Manchin and Sinema were stopping him on many things. So not every Democrat is with us on this issue. We have three co-equal branches of government. The president doesn't have a magic wand, and we don't want that. We need more Americans who are willing to recognize we must get involved in the primaries. We must get involved in every election. And also at this point, when it comes to guns, and I think more progressives and more young people, more people realize we must get involved on our community level, on our state level, because a lot of the worst aspects of all of these things we're talking about are now coming out of the state houses.
But to hear a president say he's powerless, I understand, you need Congress, you absolutely do,
Yeah.
but you got the biggest bully pulpit in the world.
Well, that's how I feel.
You're powerless.
And I would certainly use it. Not only the biggest bully pulpit, but executive orders that you can use. There has been a tendency of Democratic governments and the Democratic presidents in the modern era to back up when things get tough. Roosevelt said, when the economic royalists came at him, what he called the economic royalists, he said, I welcome their hatred. And that's what we need, is a president who says, I welcome their hatred. Mm. We had an assault weapon ban for 10 years. Mm. And during those 10 years, we did have much, much fewer mass shootings.
Go ahead.
So, Ms. Williamson,
my thoughts on that segment, I noticed that the last minute she said mass gun shootings. And we don't want to beat this horse up, okay? I don't want to beat this horse when we talk about guns and when we talk about where the shootings are happening and what's happening. These shootings, aside from a small percentage of mass shootings such as what happened in the schools or at the polls or those things, they happen, but they are not as many as you would think compared to the inner cities that have shootings every weekend. And I hate to bring up Chicago, but we're going to have to talk about Chicago. Because every weekend they have mass shootings, and these shootings are happening in inner liberal cities. Now you saw how she tangoed. That was a tango dance that she and the crew just did. They just kind of moved around the question. They never talked about, like Larry Elder talked about it. I don't know if Vivek talked about it, but I know Elder talked about it, that it is the Black people in this country, in these inner liberal cities, that's doing these massive shootings, crime, and crime. You see how she tangled around it? Nobody else brought it up, but these are the truths. It's not the guns that's killing people. It's the people behind the guns. And that's my take.
because I've heard a lot about, what the Biden administration is doing wrong. Tell me about your top, if you had to pick 3 top policies that you would focus on, first 100 days, or what do you see as you have a lot of issues on your website, I know they're all equally important, but if you had to give us 3 on what you think is the most important thing to do right away, what would that be?
I find it interesting. She actually is smiling presenting this question. She's actually smiling. We got none of that. She was the mean dog with the other people that look like her. Interesting how she treats this, by their means, white supremacist woman. I'm just saying.
We need universal health care in this country. We have 1 in 4 Americans living with medical debt. We have 68,000 Americans a year who die from lack of health care. We have 85 million Americans who are either uninsured or underinsured. We have 18 million Americans who cannot afford to fulfill the prescriptions that their doctors give them. So movement towards universal health care is very important to me. I would cancel the college loan debt. We need to get back to free college in this country, which we had until the 1960s. I would have every single penny of the Pentagon audited. I would make sure that every company that has a contract with the U.S. government that is a union-busting company that those contracts are canceled. I would call together the group that I would like to go to Camp David to have a serious conversation about reparations. Also, talking about racial issues, I would call Tim Scott and Cory Booker into the Oval Office and say, bring whoever you want. We're not leaving this office until we have a serious bipartisan bill on police reform. BLM, for example, biggest protest movement in the history of this country, and there's not been one serious piece of legislation that has addressed the issues of police violence and what is obviously going on there, that something is very, very wrong.
Hold the presses. I'm not sure what I understood with her. She threw BLM in there. She for it? Is she against it? I wasn't sure. I'm not sure what I got out of that from her. But okay, that's what she's gonna do.
I wonder if any of that stuff is realistic, like the student loan debt, the police reform. Maybe just because I've become such a pessimist because of the system. Mm-hmm. I just wonder if any of that stuff is realistic, or is just lip service that
because they want you to think that. Yeah. Because they want you to think that. So this is the deal. The Republicans don't even pretend. But the Democrats are like, oh, we're, just bring us in again. Let us finish the job. Bring us in again. We're really trying on that. We're really trying. That's what they want you to think. They want us to think, well, I guess it just can't be done. Why the hell can't it be done? Every other advanced democracy has universal health care. Every other advanced democracy has free college. Every other advanced democracy has free child care, paid family leave, guaranteed sick pay, and guaranteed living wage. The reason it can't be done is because they are in the pockets of the insurance companies, because they are in the pockets of the pharmaceutical companies, food companies, chemical companies, big oil and defense contractors. And so they've numbed us. And they've known like, well, I guess I can't. I guess we can't do it. We're like acquiescing to that. Meanwhile, that's the way you get the fascists. Because people, what Franklin Roosevelt said is, we would not have to worry about a fascist takeover as long as democracy delivered on its blessings. Democracy is not delivered on its blessings. You have 100 million people who don't vote. I think for many people, it's the only way to say F you to that system. Mm-hmm. It's a dysfunctional, but I think an understandable reaction to a system that is doing nothing for them and that they know no matter who they elect, their visceral experience is that I'm still at the effect of an unfair economic system, which is policy after policy, making it easier for those who already have money to make more money and more difficult for everybody else to even survive. The American people have got to do an intervention here. That is the only way it's going to happen, is if we bring someone from the outside and say, this shit stops now.
Well, how does it stop, though? We talk at the housing market, right? So many minorities still can't purchase houses, right? Interest rates are still sky high. They're saying that in neighborhoods, that we live in the school systems are the worst. They don't have books. They don't have computers. Wi-Fi sucks, right? Then talking to the car manufacturers, they say the government is really pushing these electric cars, but they're saying that there's no possible way that there's a grid strong enough to uphold all these cars. So they say they just think it's a bunch of lip service. So how do we fix those problems?
Okay, you fix it by, wouldn't it be nice to have a
Interesting, right? I like his laid back look today because he was not like that with Larry Elder last interview, but he posed similarly the same thing. And Elder's response, he went to the school choice, saying in reference to why he is for school choice. This one is worried about Wi-Fi in the schools. We're worried about something else. These kids can learn without the Wi-Fi, okay? They can learn. What they don't need in the schools is the pornography and not teaching the kids where they can't even read and write. And it's not because of Wi-Fi they're not reading and writing, okay? It's not because of Wi-Fi. So he posed that same question last time. So at least he's consistent.
president who said everything you just said?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Right there. That's your bully pulpit. A president who just names what's really going on in this country. You have these huge companies coming in, buying all this housing. First of all, you should not be able to turn housing into a commodity in a country where 600,000 people are homeless. You know, the problem is not just the poor in this country, but also the near poor. People who are terrified because they know if one rent check doesn't get paid. Okay? So those companies should not be able to buy those houses. At the very least, there should be a high tax on them, and people who are individuals just seeking to get into homes should be given the priority. And you need a president who names that, because what you just named was the essential, fundamental inequity and injustice of the economic system in the United States. We do not need another president who doesn't mention that, because that's negative, because that president is counting on the donor class for whom that's not the case. All these people going, oh yes, Biden is the one, Biden is the one. They, most of the time, they have health care. Mm-hmm. They can send their kids to college.
But how do you stop, big groups of people going in places like Brooklyn and Harlem and buying up the neighborhoods, pushing
That's
minorities out, and only bringing their own people in
Right.
and charging high rent or high prices for the house?
Right.
We've seen it there. We've seen it in LA. We've seen it in parts of Jersey. We've seen it in parts of Georgia. How do we stop that? Because what's happening is they're taking our property, charging a premium for it, and then using it because it's close to cities, or close to
Right.
subways, or close to places like that.
Right. And obviously there is a racial element there, and that is the issue, of course, of gentrification. That is why I believe my reparations plan is the best. Because my reparations plan is, if you have a group of Black elders. Now, this group would have to be multi-generational, because I think the money should be dispersed over 20 years. If you have, there are, whether it has to do with Black leaders in business, Black leaders in culture, Black leaders in the arts, Black leaders in politics. Let's say you have all this money, and you have, let's say, Black real estate moguls, and they do exist in this country.
Absolutely.
They would look at Greenville, South Carolina, and they would look at the money, the billions coming in that year, and go, we're going to buy those blocks. We're going to buy those blocks. And that's how you deal with it. If you just say that it comes in, and then also, I don't believe that white people should be telling Black people how to spend that money. So if I owe you $1,000, I don't think it's my business how you spend it.
Correct.
But if you have an amount of money, and those billions that are coming in every year, that's called wealth. It's as simple as that. You could buy all those blocks. We're going to buy that neighborhood, as opposed to this person who could stay in their rent longer. Although if some of the money is spent that way, or historical Black colleges or descendants of slaves, that's not my business. But in terms of what you were saying, it's called wealth. The wealth to just buy that neighborhood.
Go ahead, Ted.
Not sure where I want to go with this. Well, yes, I know. China. They are not calling it out properly. She's tangoing around the thing. The Chinese is coming in here and buying up our land. The Chinese is coming in here and buying up our property. To do what with, I don't know. taking opportunities away. And Biden isn't doing anything about the Chinese because, well, friends, they are in bed together, right? So if you're going to call it out, call it out. Don't tiptoe around it. Don't tango around it. Say it's the Chinese that's coming here and taking away these things.
So, Ms. Williamson, I am known to be pretty tough on candidates, when I'm asking questions. And, I have to be fair and ask, I certainly appreciate the theory. I appreciate, writing books and great ideas. But in fairness, would you say that you bring experience on any level of government of actually getting, even small things done? Or what I'm looking for the receipts. What can we point to say, okay, this is the candidate that can actually get X, Y, Z done, or get us a little bit closer to it when you talk about, all of these things, particularly when you talk about the Black community?
So first of all, just in general, you're asking if I have the sort of technical expertise to perpetuate that system. Washington, D.C. is filled with political car mechanics. Some of them are very good, and certainly you have to hire those people and have them in your administration. The problem today is not that we don't have good political car mechanics. The problem is we are on the wrong road. So that question stems from this conversation that says only people whose careers have been spent within the car that drove us into this ditch should possibly be considered qualified to lead us out of that ditch. My expertise is not that I know how to perpetuate and effectuate that system. My expertise is that I know something about disrupting it. And if you want to know that, listen to everything I've said here today.
Yeah, no, Ms. Williamson, respectfully, that's not what I'm saying. In using your analogy, what I'm saying is, have you ever touched a carburetor? Have you ever touched a motor? Have you ever touched anything, in the car?
So yes, I actually.
And I'm certainly not talking about a career. I'm saying that if, again, going back to the example on a task force, if there are active task force now on reparations, and I see any candidate for that matter not getting involved in having those conversations now and speaking from a theory standpoint, it does. I'm kind of taken aback by it, because I want to know if you're willing to get your hands dirty now, rolling up your sleeves to see what you can do now at your level. So that's what I'm asking.
I think we all do in the field that we can. I think I've gone far towards helping to.
So she said it, I can be tough. But in her being tough with this one right now, with this question, so I've zoomed in on this particular thing that she's got for you. And it's this task force thing. For Vivek, it was service. For Elder, it was, I forget what it was. But for you, it's the task force. And so she wants to know what you've done as far as the task force. What qualifies you to be running for this space, for this seat? So, but she wasn't rude about it. She was smiling throughout the whole time. She was not angry about it like she was with the other two. She posed a question, and she has a follow-up and a follow-up. Nobody's saying you can't ask questions and do your follow-ups, but it was in the way that she carried herself with this question. And she's very, very different in this recording.
Create the conversation in the United States, which actually led to things like the situation in California. Everybody has their role. One of the things I have seen, and yes, I've been around a lot of people in politics, it's a business like any other. It's a business like any other. It's people sitting around a room, talking, negotiating. And yes, I have been as much of a businesswoman as any of the men who would come in here and be businessmen, and no one would say, well, would you know how to do it? So yes, I believe that I've worked with many, many people. But more than anything, I feel that I have the power to say what needs to be said and not obfuscate. But yes, I've had plenty of experience at business, and I've been in political circles enough, including observing even at the White House, to see this is a political system like any other. It's men sitting around, women sitting around a table, just like we're doing now, having a conversation and talking about what we're going to do.
I wonder if you need experience as much as you need will.
Right? That's right.
Look
Thank
at somebody
you.
like Trump. Trump didn't have no experience. He just had to the will.
Thank you.
to
And
do
you know
what he
what?
wanted to do for his party.
Thank you very much. The issue with him was not that he didn't have political experience. It's the issue of his character, his ethics. You're right. He could have brought, if he had brought in a different type of person, he chose to bring in a Stephen Miller or Sebastian Gorka. He's a perfect example. You can't say he wasn't an effective president. Mm-hmm. He was effective at doing things that most of us would be horrified by, but he certainly was effective.
People don't like to have that conversation. Media always talks about what Republicans and Trump get wrong. What do you believe they get right that can be used to fight against him?
Well, one of the things that Trump did, and I wouldn't say it was right, but it was powerful, he struck a nerve. He hit a nerve. And the nerve he hit had to do with harnessing some of the worst aspects of the American character, racism, homophobia, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, all those things that we know are the lower aspects of American consciousness. I think we need a president who harnesses the better aspects of American consciousness, the better angels of our nature. Justice. Justice, thy shall pursue. The book of Deuteronomy. We do not have economic justice in this country. We do not have criminal justice in this country. We do not have racial justice in this country. We do not have environmental justice in this country. My experience when I ran last time, and really this is not just about when I ran for president, this is true of my entire career. I believe we are a decent people. We are a decent people. I'm not saying we're better than anyone else, because we're not, but we're not worse than anyone else. But we need a politics that speaks to the noble in people, that speaks to, we must be a just nation. We must be a fair nation, that speaks to what it takes to have a humanitarian rather than an economic bottom line. We now have a country, and I think that there are many people on the right as well as the left who see this now. We have a country where the bottom line in the way we function is short-term profit maximization for huge corporate entities rather than humanitarian values. Mm-hmm. You were talking about children before. We have millions of American children who go to school, in schools where they don't even have the resources to teach that child to read. If a child cannot learn to read by the age of 8, the chances of high school graduation are drastically decreased. The chances of incarceration are drastically increased. John Kennedy said within 10 years we will land a man on the moon. I would say within 10 years, every public school in the United States will be a palace of culture, learning, and the arts. We have in Chicago, in the public school system in Chicago, I was reading an article that 1 out of 4 girls in the public school system in Chicago would be diagnosed with PTSD, as bad as a returning veteran from a battle zone. But remember, these kids, they're not living with post-traumatic stress. They're living with present traumatic stress every single day, activated. And we need a president who speaks to that and cares about that. Right now, children, they're not old enough to vote, so they're not a constituency. They're not old enough to work, so they have no financial leverage. We need a massive transfer of our resources in the direction of children under 10, and that's in every neighborhood of the United States.
So there you have it. That was Marianne Williamson, presidential candidate 2024 on the Democrat ticket, on the Democrat side. She talked a lot about being, actually towards the end there, she mentioned it as well. Again, they're pushing her out, keeping her out, the way they did Bernie Sanders back in 2016 when he was running. And so they are the party of democracy, but yet they are silencing the opposition in their own party, from what she's saying. And we know what they're doing with President Trump on the other side. They've got indictment after indictment after indictment after indictment after indictment for Trump. But for them, they're silencing them. What if she really became a threat, was really grabbing I don't think she's getting anywhere with her campaign. I don't think any of them are. Kennedy seems to be doing a lot of talking. He's got a lot going on. We're seeing him, but most of it, he's being censored. They don't want him. They don't want people talking to him. They don't want him getting his message out there. Again, the party of democracy, shutting down their own. But again, look at what they're doing to Trump. Indictments. Trying to lock up their opponent. Fascism, as Charlemagne would say. Fascism is coming at our door. And she said it, we've got fascism at our doorstep. Florida, DeSantis, fascism as our doorstep. Trump, DeSantis, fascism as our doorstep. But it's their party that is silencing people on every level. They're silencing we the people through big tech and the media. They're silencing candidates running in their own races through the media and big tech and telling them that, no, we're not having debates. You can't talk to Joe Biden about anything, about this. No, Joe Biden is the guy. And you just have to handle that. We're not having debates, even though we have candidates to debate. I guess they learned from the last debate and all of that. So it'll be interesting to see. I need to find out who else is running against Biden. So we've got RFK Jr., Marianne Williamson, and Cornel West. Now, I don't think I'm going to do the Cornel video. I don't want to sit through an hour of it. I really don't. I'll think about doing it. I don't know. But I would be interested to see if the Breakfast Club does an interview with RFK Jr., who is another Democrat candidate. I'd like to see how that conversation goes. So that's going to be it for this video. I thank you all for watching, sharing, and I'm going to have shorts, some of the cliff moments of this interview, and I will probably have a shorter version as well, maybe of a good clipping of it. And so, but it was an interesting talk. But the reason I did this video, as I said, was to compare how Marianne Williamson was treated by the Breakfast Club and how the other candidates, Vivek and Larry Elder, were treated by this crew. And I have to say, it was night and day, this interview style. Tezlyn Figario did push Williamson a little. She had her teeth, her teeth on the bone, but it was very professional, a little bit more professional than what she did with the other two guys. So maybe that's her style. I don't know, but she really needs to work on it because not good at all. But, you know, maybe that's just the way she does things. I don't know, but she was decent today with Marianne Williamson, I have to say. And she was also decent with Cornel West. And from what I understand, they know each other. They have a personal relationship, obviously. So she was pleasant with him. But in any event, I think that, again, she was very rude to the other people, and she was not so rude in this taping with Miriam. She even said good morning, and she smiled a whole lot. She even laughed a few times. Wow, who knew Pitbull Figaro could laugh or smile or even say good morning? I'll see y'all in the next video.